Let's do this. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unfound Live for August 11th of 2025. I cannot believe it's already been like a week and a half since my birthday. Where does the time go? I hope you're all doing fantastically out there. Things have been going somewhat smoothly here in the Clearwater Beach area. It's been all good here. And I have a fantastic show lined up for all of you tonight. As I've stated before, the rule is that I will at least get to the items in the title. So tonight, as I've been starting to do, I've picked out kind of a disappearance, an unsolved disappearance from what we might say history. And I take a look at it. Of course, it was not what we would, the cliche of a deep dive, nothing like that. By the way, I'm not a big fan of the deep dive. I hate cliches. Maybe that comes from my fiction writing days, even though I do run across them off the top of my head once in a while. But it's, deep dive. Well, let's really dig into that. I don't know. There's just something about those phrases that turns me off, even though I realize that I use them once in a while. But I realize when I hear people on TV or other podcasts or whatever I'm listening to, people say that stuff, it like makes me cringe, because I know if I'm writing a novel or something, I'd be avoiding all of that. But anyway, we're going to talk about the Sodder Children tonight. Not a second by second, minute by minute accounting of the disappearance. I'm going to go over the generalities. I would urge any of you who are not familiar with that disappearance, you could simply go to Wikipedia, although I'm sure there have been many podcasts, YouTube channels that have taken a look at what happened there and what the reasoning might be for the disappearance of some of the children. I'm just going to go through the generalities, and I'm going to show you how I look at a disappearance like that. And if your memory is really, really good, we did cover a disappearance similar to it. In fact, we've covered a couple that are similar to it. If I really want to be picky, of course, Bernard Rusness and Peggy McKay, married couple, died in a burned house, and their remains were not found for some reason. And then more recently, when Heather Grotman came on last year, she and I talked about the disappearance of Ricky Jean Bryant, a little girl who went missing from a burned down house as well. Well, we have 5 children missing for the Sodder family, so I'm going to take a look at that. Also, Ed Me on A&E. There's a funny story behind that, kinda, that I will be getting into here before the 2 hours are up. And then I also want to take a look at a safari murder of a couple of American couple who went to safari, and one person in that couple ended up dead. So those are at least absolute 100% going to get to all of those topics tonight. But of course, I come to you always over-prepared, so I got a lot of other things to discuss. As you are watching tonight, please give this live show, a thumbs up. If you're not yet a subscriber to this channel, hit the subscribe button down in the bottom right-hand corner. If you're watching on YouTube, share it with your friends and family. Tell other people in your true crime circles about this live show that has been going on, almost 8 years now. 1 year less than the podcast, by the way. I did the podcast for a year and some months, and I think I started the live show in like October of 2017, something like that. So tell all of your friends about that. And you can support what we do here at Unfound a variety of ways. While you are watching/listening this evening, you can hit the super chat button at the bottom of the chat if you're watching on YouTube and contribute that way. You can go to where it says there on the screen, patreon.com/unfound podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also hit the join button below. And then also you can go to paypal.me/unfound podcast if you'd like to contribute to what we do here. Now, as far as everything that has gone on since last Monday, I say this every week. Time goes by so fast. I have these singing lessons that I do on Friday mornings now it's become weekly now for almost a month now. And I don't, like I said, I don't know where the time goes. It seems like I get a lesson and then it seems like the lesson is the next day. And I've even brought this up to my teacher. Her name is Jacqueline about this. And it's so weird. I have weekly lessons with her, but it seems like they are daily lessons. That's how fast time goes. I guess because I'm busy. I guess that's what's going on there. But since we all got together last Monday night, August 4th, I had a good trivia week. My team on Wednesday, the team that we've been like 13 years now, and we have some new members. We came in third, which pretty good. Maybe you had a chance at first place if everything just would have gone perfectly. But fortunately, we came in third place, which means our table is reserved for this coming Wednesday, and which means I don't have to get there at 4:30 to reserve a table. It's a very, very popular place, and it gets so crowded. Trivia doesn't start till 7. But like I said, I get there at 4:30 just to make sure, because usually we have like 6 people, so you have to get a table for 6. If you don't get there like 5:30 something, good luck getting a large table. Good luck. And just to give you an idea, last Wednesday, there were 139 people there, 29 teams. 29 teams, 139 people. What is that? That's averaging 4.5 people per team. It's crazy. So that's why you have to get there so early. And of course, if you're just one person or maybe a 2-people team, then maybe you don't have to worry about as much. But we generally have around 6 people there, so I got to get there. But like I said, the nice part is that if you finish in the top 3, you have a table reserved for you for the next week. And we haven't had that happen in a while because we haven't been finishing in the top 3. We've been playing well and we're leading. We've just been very consistent. We haven't finished in the top 3 to be able to do that. Well, finally we did. And so that is nice. And then on Saturday, I once again joined some of the new people on their team over to a different place called Sharks. And just like the week before, we were second going into the final question, but ended up on top. So that was really good. So there were, how many of us? There were 4 of us. And like I said, we were behind by at least a couple points. The first place team did not know the final answer. We did know the final answer and bet as many points as we could, which over there is 20. Over at the other place, you can bet as many points as you have. It's like Jeopardy. And so we ended up coming in first place. So that's 2 weeks in a row that I have come in first place playing on their team. Am I making much of a difference over there? I don't know. I did not know the question, the answer to the final question a week and a half ago. I did know the answer this on Saturday, but some of the other people on the team did as well. So I don't know if I'm playing that huge of a role in the last couple weeks of success? I don't know, but I did know a couple questions that they didn't know. So I guess that. But as far as winning outright, I think we would have won anyway. So there's that. And by the way, if you're wondering what the final question was from this past Saturday, the question was, where did the dance, the cha-cha, originate? Where did the dance, the cha-cha, C-H-A, where did it originate? Well, JoJo's saying, always curious. Well, there you go. That's the final question from this past weekend over at Sharks there, JoJo. So you can feast on that question for a little bit. Where did the cha-cha originate? What country? Hello, Amy. Hello, Charlie. What's going on? Lisa, I hope you got your nap. I hope you are wide awake for this live show. No snoozing around here. By the way, I've been sleeping fantastically. there are a couple nights where getting to sleep has been a little slower, but for the most part, I'm falling asleep in like 5 minutes. I've been really wearing myself out. Fishing, what's going on? Hello, JoJo. Kate, good to see you, Fishing. Charlie says, good evening. I'm just stopping by to say I've got boys with me tonight. They say hi too. Hello to the sons. Charlie, Charlie, now that I'm thinking about it, have you made any plans with Brian and Laureen for them to stop in to see you? Because they're the whole way out to the Pacific Ocean now. Were any plans made to run into them anywhere? I haven't even thought about asking you about that. JoJo, always curious do you know what the final answer is? Anybody out there? Anybody in the chat? Don't cheat. Where did the cha-cha, in what country did the cha-cha originate? Moving on, I know many of you follow me on Facebook. And if you do, you saw my video posted from a couple days ago. I bought myself something for my birthday, and it came in like a week later. Not very expensive. But I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I said, well, I guess my birthday is the perfect time. I got myself a custom welcome mat outside my front door, which is right over there. I've been meaning to do it. I've been looking around. I really didn't see anything. I wanted something to be kind of funny, interesting, not something, that everybody else would have. I think many of you know that the decorations and things that I have in my condo here. If you walked into this condo, you'd certainly know that a single guy lives here. You might, and you'd probably know really quick, well, this must be a guy of a certain age. Because in some ways, it's a little bit like an arcade in here. As some of you remember, you can remember seeing when I had my desk over there, and you could see the arcade games in the background. They're now over where the desk used to be, by the way. So there's that, and I had a lava lamp in here. It finally died, but I have one of these globes that has the electricity, wherever it's called, a Tesla globe or something like that. And then, of course, I have a lot of rock and roll heavy metal posters in my place in frames. Like right over here is Def Leppard, Pyromania, Kiss Destroyer. Over in my kitchen, I have Iron Maiden, an Iron Maiden poster. Over there, I have a Rolling Stones poster, ACDC, all over, Ozzy Osbourne with Randy Rhoads, all over my condo, variety of places. So I needed something that went along, hello D, went along with that kind of theme. So I found a place that does custom floor mats, or what floor mats? Custom welcome mats. And the welcome mat looks like the front of a Marshall amp, like a guitar amp, like you would see on stage for a rock and roll band or something. You've seen them. or Fender, there's kind of similar Fender Marshall, like a black, it's a black speaker case. I'm sure with switches on it and dials and everything. That's what it looks like. But where the speakers would be on this, it says, come inside. The show's about to start. And you can get that custom printed. And it was only, the floor mat was what? No, floor mat. Welcome mat. The welcome mat was like $30 some. It wasn't really that expensive, but it's custom made. That's the backing. And then you can put whatever print or whatever you want on there. And I got mine that says, come inside. The show's about to start. And that is a line from the song Carnival No. 9 by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. That is part of a much larger kind of concept song that they were kind of progressive rock. They used a lot of keyboards and stuff back then, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But many of you probably have heard the song, even though you might not know what the name is. It's the song that starts, welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. So glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. That song is called Carnival No. 9. And it's played on many classic rock stations and has a lot of keyboards and stuff in it. And there's a line in there, come inside, the show's about to start, guaranteed to blow your head apart. I got the first part. Come inside, the show's about to start, and it's printed. And that welcome mat now sits outside my front door. I was so, as I stated in the video, if you saw it on Facebook, I was so geeked up when I got it. So geeked up, like I'm still laughing. It's so stupid to be geeked up about something like that. But it kind of goes with the theme of the way that I have decorated this place. And I'm even having some ideas because I have some windows on that side of the condo that face out into the landing where the elevators are. And it looks kind of plain. So once I put that out there, I was like, man, I should put something in these windows too. Some don't know what I'm going to do there. But that's what I got. That was my present to myself. I spent a big $30 some on myself for my birthday. Yeah, big spender. So if you've missed that, go to Facebook, go to my private personal page, and you'll see me do a little video on the whole thing. Let's see what everybody is saying here. Lisa says, Friday's Unfound was so good. Love the energy of your guests. So detailed. Yeah, Linda has a lot of energy. Very easy to interview her. You don't have to pull teeth with her. She is ready to talk. And in fact, you probably noticed that a couple times I even had to, not trying to be rude, but had to kind of jump into the middle of a sentence of hers because I needed to clarify something, jump in to ask a question, to kind of make sure all of you understood what she was saying. Certainly if I'd have just hit the record button, she could have talked for 2 hours without me saying a word. Certainly. Perfectly fine. That's easier than the opposite where I have to ask questions for the guest to say anything. So yeah, great interview. Thank you, Lisa. Jojo says, I have no idea regarding the trivia question. You have no idea where the cha-cha originated. Okay. Thank you, Jojo. Jojo loves the new welcome, Matt. Hello, D. D, what's going on? D was watching Idaho 4 stuff. All right, D. Brian Coburg, etc. Well, if nobody else wants to try to answer that trivia question, the answer is the cha-cha originated in the country of Cuba. And I will tell you the way I knew that is because if you've ever seen the movie Godfather 2, Godfather Part 2, you will remember that all those gangster guys, they go to Cuba. Remember, they all go down there, Michael, Fredo, all of them. And there's something that they're at one of those concert halls or whatever. And Fredo, Michael's older brother, but Fredo's kind of the doofus of the sons. He says to watch out for this one guy. He dances a mean cha-cha or something like that. And that's always stuck with me. Well, the only reason he would say that is because the cha-cha is popular in Cuba. So it makes sense then to me that is where the cha-cha originated. And I was right. But a couple other people on the trivia team on Saturday night also knew that. Obviously, the team that was in first place going into the final question did not know that. Oh, well, snooze, you lose. So, yeah, the cha-cha originated in Cuba. Derek says, I was just going to type Cuba. All right, Derek. Well, sorry about that. And then Amy also has a little Cuban flag there. All right, Amy, thank you, man. You guys were so good with the emojis. So that's really what's going on. Watched a lot of disc golf. There was disc golf played in Finland and in China this past week. And I watched both of them. Even though it's like weird times, I watched some of it live, some of it recorded. It was fascinating in China. They were playing in this public park that was set up a temporary course right in the middle of the city. So there's like all these big buildings and skyscrapers around. And here they are playing disc golf right there. Would be very much like if they set up a temporary disc golf park in Central Park in New York City. Kind of the same thing. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So that's really, other than that, not much is going on. Talked to Dad today. He was out he was at someplace in a food court having lunch when I called him. So he's having a good time, whatever he was doing. And it's really all I have to report regarding anything, going on with me since last Monday. They have redesigned the elevators, by the way. They've put new paneling and everything in the elevators such that it's not as dark in the same lighting, but the wood paneling inside of it is like a lighter color now, and it really brightened everything up in there. It's amazing how that can happen. Same lighting, different paneling, and everything just gets a lot brighter. I think this is just the beginning of a lot of changes that are coming to this place, as I've talked about. Going to be a lot of stuff done, including in my own condo. I think they're going to be tearing up the tile on my balcony. Don't get me started. So it's going to be I think it's going to be a real pain coming September. So let's move on to let's just get right into these things, these items, starting with the Sodder Children. I'm wondering though, how many of you are familiar with the disappearance of the 5 Sodder children, ages 5 to 15, from back in 1945? I'm wondering, I don't know, 5 children go missing. I'm guessing at the time it was well known, but here we are like 80 years later. And my guess is that probably only people within the true crime community that are really in the, stuff like this, murders, disappearances, serial killers, whatever you want to say, is under the true crime umbrella. Probably at this point, 80 years later, are familiar with it. I think one of the reasons may be that, of course, all of the kids who were kids that did not disappear from this fire, they're all deceased now. And so it would be up to their children. So now we got the grandchildren of these kids. And I should be transparent about this, that I did at one point try to cover their disappearances and actually did reach one of the grandchildren of one of the surviving kids years ago. In fact, it's so long ago, I know that I still lived in Madeira Beach when that was. So that's over 6 years ago. And she was not interested in being interviewed and talking to me. I can't necessarily quote her. I know I still have the email or something in my Gmail account, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com somewhere. But I think her attitude at this point is that she just didn't think it's ever going to be solved. And so at this point, it's just like, there's not, in her opinion, not really a point to it. It's just become something for people to talk about now. It's not something that, if you give attention to it, that the investigation can be moved forward that much, because it's so old. And so that's why, nothing against me or anything. I just don't think that any of these grandchildren do any sort of media at all. There certainly has been coverage by a variety of podcasts, YouTube channels, even on regular TV and everything. But I don't think any descendants in the Sodder family have anything to do with it. Fine. I totally fine by me. Whether people want to talk to me, totally up to them. I only get frustrated when they say they're going to talk and then they stand me up, or I talk to them and then they stand me up for an interview or something. That's when I get ticked off, because I put a lot of work into this, as you know. But people are just straight out from the first email. You know what? I really don't want to talk to you. I really don't think it's going to be constructive. A lot of different reasons. Totally fine. I'm not bitter at all. Totally fine. So I get it. So I just want to make clear, I have made an attempt to feature their disappearances on the podcast. That's seemingly never going to happen. So I didn't think it was wrong for me, at least tonight, to at least go over the accepted facts, the general facts, and then give you some insight. So here we go. DD says, definitely familiar with the Sodder story. D knows about it. Derek says, I've heard of it. I saw a good YouTube video detailing the case years ago. Derek says, though, I don't remember the details. Karen says, she is familiar. Amy says she is familiar. All right. This disappearance happened on Christmas Eve of 1945. So to put in the proper context, this is just, what would it be? 4 months after the end of World War II. I mean, we're talking a while ago. Of course, my dad was, my dad's still alive, 88. He was 9 years old when this happened. It's been a while. And, just to also give you, put in the context, we know that Mary Jane Van Gilder went missing in the same year of 1945. If you remember, of course, her disappearance eventually got solved by some great detective work. So this disappearance happened on Christmas Eve. So going from December 24th to December 25th. And what happened is, somehow at the Sodder residence, which is in Fayetteville, West Virginia, not Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is a decent sized city. Fayetteville, West Virginia, I think is very, very small, although I did not look for it on the map. What happened is, somehow a fire got started at this house. And when all was said and done and the family was able to get out of there, at least some of the family were able to get out of the structure, and it eventually did collapse. And it took a while for the fire department to get there. Remember, it's 1945 and it's out in the middle of nowhere in West Virginia, so we shouldn't be too surprised by that. Once the parents and some of the children were able to escape, they discovered that 5 of the kids were missing, even though the parents and those other the way it really kind of broke down is the parents and the couple of older, I think the oldest child was in the Army, but the other oldest children were there and escaped. And it was all of the younger children who disappeared. And so the parents and these older children know that these kids were there, saw them go to bed, and that's just a few hours later when this fire started and they all got out of there, 5 of the kids were missing. They didn't seemingly not escape the fire. And when, of course, they went in after this fire did get put out, and it sounds to me like the house basically just fell in on itself. I mean, it wasn't like gutted or anything. It just like tumbled down. That when they went in and started going through the rubble and the ashes and everything else, no signs of the children were found, although there are conflicting stories. But what is clear is that surely the bones of 5 children were not found in total in the remains of this house. And in fact, in reading about this, and I just went to Wikipedia, I did go back and try to find some stories on newspapers.com as well, that there were bones found later, because what happened was it was left as like, well, we're going to figure out. And then just days later, the parents, thinking that their kids did die in this fire or got just turned to ash, they actually had dirt brought in and covered the whole thing up. But then later, like months later, a year later, many years later, they had regrets about this. And so they went back in and started digging around. And they did find some human bones in there. But they determined that these bones could not have come from children that young. And now they're thinking that the dirt was taken from a cemetery, and it could be that somebody buried in the cemetery might have ended up. The bones got transferred from the cemetery to this site where this house burned down. You can go read this for yourself. I know it sounds crazy, but this is kind of what they've resolved regarding this. But what is clear is no matter them looking for any remains in 1945 or redigging everything up later, no bones connected to these 5 kids. And if you're wondering how old they were, the ages went from 5 to 14, a mixture of boys and girls. 5 to 14 years old. So, and I think we had at least 2 of the kids who were above 10 years old. I think there was like a 14-year-old, 11-year-old, and then maybe 8, 6, 5, something like that. So I think this is important when eventually I'll get into some of the analysis of this. Now, as you can imagine, a lot of rumors rolling around at the time as to, first of all, what was the cause of the fire? You have to realize in 1945 terms, in small town terms, not as an exact science as it is today. And we ran across that even with Ricky Jean Bryant just a few years later in 1949. And even if we move up to the 1970s with Bernard Rusness and Peggy McKay, who went missing before, during, or after a fire at their home. When I covered that disappearance a few years ago, and Joe Kistner was the guest, still not clear what the cause of that fire was either. So it's not unusual. You might think, well, that's suspicious. They couldn't find out. Well, we've covered other disappearances where they couldn't find out the cause either. Or if there is a cause, they haven't made it public, or there was paperwork and the paperwork got lost after all these decades. A lot of different possibilities. But some of the ideas that were thrown out as to how this fire could have gotten started, electrical. Now, what's important about this is important because just not long before this all happened, the house had been rewired and kind of brought maybe more up. I don't know how old this house was. I'm guessing this house was built before electricity was a thing in every house. And I'm guessing this house was built and then electricity got put in it at some point. And the way I understand this is that, the house got rewired again. To me, it's one of those things. If you're going to have an electrical fire in a house, it's like because the electrical system in the house is really, really old, or it's right after it's been rewired and a mistake has been made. You see a lot of this, for example, in plane crashes. When we hear about a plane failing, something mechanically failing, it's usually two different things. Either it was something that had been building up for a long, 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 long time and then finally broke, causing the plane to crash, or it's something that broke just after the plane was allegedly fixed. It's so common. You know how I know about plane crashes. So given that this could, so in my mind, very well could have been electrical. You tell me that the house just got rewired and maybe has a new fuse box and everything. I start thinking a mistake could have been made. There could have been some overload. They didn't use the right gauge of wiring or whatever else. And a fire started and burned the house down. And of course, we don't have smoke alarms back then or anything. Very easy to understand. I will tell you, some people looked at it the opposite way. Well, they just had it rewired. They shouldn't have had an electrical fire. I'm kind of the counter to that. I start hearing new electricity, new electrical system in a house, and I start thinking, well, that sounds like the most likely time that you're going to have another problem. And if you can avoid maybe a month or two, you get a house rewired and there aren't any problems in the next few months, then probably that means that electrical system is going to be good for a very, very long time. But right after it gets installed, that could be a problem time. Now, there were allegations that it might have been intentional. It sounds like speculation to me, but something that was noteworthy, the one sister, the one child who lived, an older girl, said that at some point in the night, not long before the fire was discovered or recognized, they smelled smoke, she said she heard something hit the roof of the house and roll off. Now, did they live like under some pine cone trees or something like that? I don't know. But she noted that she heard that. So was this somebody throwing something that was lit onto the house? No proof of that. Although afterwards, and we know how these things are, when you start reading about news this old, is that allegedly after everything was said and done, there was something found in the yard that could have looked like some sort of grenade or something, like something that could have maybe been, let's just put it this way, could have been coated in gasoline or some other flammable liquid or substance, then lit, and then somehow maybe with a urethane glove or something thrown onto the house. And if it hits, the roof, maybe it could catch the roof on fire, because it seems that the fire did start high on the house. It didn't start in the basement like what seemed like what happened with Bernard Ross and Peggy McKay, where even though they couldn't determine a cause, it did seem like the fire was started in the basement of that house somehow. Could be an accident, could be intentional. Whereas with Ricky Jean Bryant, once again, we're not sure how it started. But on that, it seemed like it started like on the first floor, like where you'd walk in the door, like maybe in the kitchen or something. Whereas this one, it sounds like it started somewhere higher up in this house. And I think this house had like 3 stories above ground. So there was the main story that was right with ground, and then there was a second story. And then all the kids who disappeared were all up on the 3rd story of this house. We're talking a pretty tall house here. But back then, you have a lot of kids and, kind of like a loft situation. I'm not saying it was like a full floor with like a bathroom and walking around or, halls and everything. But that's where the kids were, up on this 3rd floor / loft. And seemingly that's where it got started. Now, there were rumors that somebody could have been after Mr. Sodder. That you will read if you go getting deep into this, that even though this was after World War II, and even though Italy had been defeated along with Germany and Japan, the Third Reich had been defeated, that there were some Italians in the area of Fayetteville, West Virginia, who were unhappy that Mr. Sodder, who was Italian himself, at the time during the war, had spoken out against Mussolini. And some were thinking that this fire was started by them kind of getting revenge on him, because there were actually Italians here in the United States that were actually sad that the Third Reich lost. We have to remember that in the context of the times. It's kind of hard for us to think of this. But you do have to remember something, that there were many Americans, German Americans, once World War II broke out, they went back to Germany and fought for the Nazis. You have to remember that. Likewise, there were a lot of Italians when World War II broke out that went back to Italy and fought for Italy against the United States and, of course, England and France and all that. You have to remember that. So Mr. Sodder, their family was for the United States, wanted the United States to win the war, and the Sodders, that's not their original last name. They kind of what do they call that? Americanized or Anglan, whatever they say. They made it kind of less ethnic. They were Italian, and their last name, I think, was Soddu or something, Soddu. And when the family moved to the United States, it became Sodder to make it, like I said, less ethnic. But there were local Italians who didn't like the Sodders, and it's the parents speaking out against Mussolini in Italy. And Mussolini had died well before this happened. He was caught and executed. So there was the idea that somebody associated with the Italian mafia or something did this. As you would probably think, this sounds somewhat extravagant to me. And probably unlikely, but I'll get back to that in a moment. There was also a story that there was some sort of door-to-door salesman who had a bad interaction with Mr. Sodder, and allegedly said, it, kind of like the saying, we have now, it'd be a dang shame if, your house burnt down due to an electrical problem or something like that. And of course, maybe that's exactly what happened. So allegedly, there were these threats against the Sodder family in the weeks before, months before. I'm not going to say years, but weeks and months before this happened. This allegedly was going on. And looking at this 80 years later, it's hard for me to determine, did those things actually happen, or were they legend that have become fact? Was it hindsight 2020? Was the family blowing things out of proportion because they really just didn't know what happened? It's really, really, really hard to tell. Both of those seem unlikely, and it's certainly neither of them. Both of them could explain a fire. What it wouldn't explain is, of course, the children being missing. So it's tough to say, but at least initially, the Sodder children, the children between 5 and 14, they were accepted to have died in the fire. But as time went on, the parents mainly started to think that maybe they didn't. They started thinking about, well, there was, this and that, and they couldn't be, could the fire have been deliberately started? As we see in a lot of disappearances, even to this day, where the family thinks one thing happened, but as you get to the first month, to the 6 months through the year, and people start talking, especially in small towns, it starts getting crazy. We might put like Tom Brown's disappearance in that. Originally, it was, well, he went off and he went missing, But then you got like this, and it got suspect the sheriff, then the deputies, and then it's some betting scam that Tom got caught up in regarding high school students, on and on, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Conspiracy. It's hard for me to tell whether this was going on back in 1945 regarding the Sodder children, or there's actually something factual to all this. It's just hard to tell. Now, some other once the fire happened, and while it was going on, it does seem that Mr. Sodder, at least one of the older children, noticed that the kids, the younger kids, were not out there yet, and the house is still standing, but it's on fire. And they did try to do some things to try to get back in there to see where they were. But strangely, once again, I don't know if this is hindsight 2020 or what, there was a ladder for some reason that they usually kept outside or nearby the house for some reason. And in the moment at night, in the middle of the night, and I think this was 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., they couldn't find that ladder. Seemingly, the ladder had disappeared. So they could have used that ladder, prop it up against the house, maybe climb up there and see what's going on. I don't, of course, you can understand this. Desperation. And Mr. Sodder would not be the first parent or the last to try to go back into a burning house to save a child who wasn't out of the house yet. Very common. Of course, people do that for their pets too. But they couldn't find this ladder that was usually always right there outside the house. Instead, he had some sort of business where he had a couple trucks parked there. He backed one of the trucks up to the house and tried to stand on like the cab or something, and the truck wouldn't start. Rockford, I got you, Rockford. And so, of course, a lot of conspiracies went, and did somebody set the house on fire, then sabotage the trucks too? Because there were two trucks, neither seemingly could be started, and maybe had one of them been able to have been started, one could have been backed up to the house. You stand on top of it, maybe be able to get up to the third, and at least look in a third floor window or this loft window to see if the kids are in there or whatever. The trucks wouldn't start. So these ways of being able to get up to the third floor just couldn't do it for some reason. Now, you should know the ladder was eventually found. It wasn't stolen or anything, but instead of it being right near the house, it was like 75 feet away and couldn't be seen in the dark. They just weren't even, hey, it's not there. They're not going to go traipsing through the dark to try to figure out where it was. It wasn't in its usual place. When the sun finally came up, the ladder was there, but it was much farther away from the house than normal. As for the trucks, I never did see any information as to why they wouldn't start. However, I did see where somebody hypothesized that in a rush to try to start either of these trucks, they could have flooded them. Now, if you're not familiar, here's where we have to get into some automotive lingo. If you don't know what flooding is, we don't really have that happen anymore because we have fuel injection. But back when internal combustion engines had carburetors, usually you'd have to press on the gas once before starting the car, because by pressing on the gas, that would move a spring on the carburetor, which would then release a little bit of gas down into the cylinders. And then you turn the key, the battery, of course, ignites that gasoline that's in the chambers, and the engine starts. You don't have to worry about that with fuel injection these days. You don't have to do it. In fact, if you do that before starting in a fuel injection vehicle, you could have problems. Well, the issue is that if you pump the gas too many times on a carbureted vehicle, you can flood it. And what that means is so much gas gets into the cylinders that the spark plugs can't light the gasoline. And it's called flooded. Once again, it's a I'm putting the little ear bunnies up, the bunny ears beside my head, flooded. And usually what you have to do is you have to give the engine a couple minutes for that gas to kind of drain out or evaporate. And then you can start the vehicle, but it could be a while, could be minutes. And of course here, seconds really mattered due to this house being on fire. The idea is that they tried to go out there. They were so desperate. They get in there, they're pressing on the gas, trying to start the car while turning the key. And it's not starting because it's flooded. Because it does seem the trucks did eventually start later. And of course, being old enough to have driven some carbureted vehicles back in the 1980s, I can remember vehicles. My dad had a Jeep Wagoneer, I think it was a 1981, that had a carbureted engine in it. I can remember flooding that, even in the 1980s technology. Of course, we're going back to the 1940s, where vehicles were not even close to as reliable as they even were in the 1980s. I mean, I know we look back at the 1980s now when we look at vehicles and think, man, the technology, really nothing compared to today. Well, in the 1980s, that was like going to space compared to the 1940s. So it'd probably been much easier to flood vehicles back in the 1940s. And we know back then, vehicles were not close to reliable as they were even in the 1960s and 70s. So we have to think about that. So what do I make all of this? So this is, like I said, this is not a complete coverage of every, second in all of this. But what we have is a fire situation started somehow, and 5 kids went missing somehow. And there does seem to be some controversy. Maybe it could be sensationalism. Stories that we have to consider in assessing what happened here. Because, these are the kinds of disappearances that, if you really, really want to get skilled in analyzing disappearances, these are the ones that are really, 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 really going to test you. In contrast to some here on Unfound that are pretty straightforward. And this is one of those ones that's on the fringe, and of course, it's probably never going to be solved. But can you intelligently talk about it without going to Kookville or Conspiracy City? The first thing I think about is the date, Christmas Eve of 1945. Did somebody or a group really plan to do this on Christmas Eve in the middle of the night? It seems unlikely. Do houses get broken into? Do kids get kidnapped? Yes. Of course, with JonBenet Ramsey, if we really want to bring this up into the modern age, even though that was still back in the 1990s, I realize a lot of people think her father did it. A lot of people think the mother did it. Maybe the brother did it. But there is a considerable number of people out there who think that a stranger did it. Somebody got into that house and did that to JonBenet. And we can think of maybe less well-known disappearances, even the murder of children, where assailants, suspects, killers did sneak into homes and take children, kill children. Maybe we can think about Madeleine McCann. So it can be done. But somebody really planned to take 5 kids on Christmas Eve. And we have to remember, as I stated with the ages, somebody did this taking I think there was a 4. Let me make sure what I'm right about this. Let me make sure I get this correct. I want to get ages just to see something. Let me see here. Hold on just one second. It seems unlikely breaking into a place to kidnap a 14-year-old. and in addition to other children of a variety of ages, I think that those kids would put up a fight. I think. It seems like a lot of work, especially for one person. And it very well may be the reason the ladder was, thrown off into the distance where it usually was. They could have used it, but once again, what are we saying? 2 or 3 people went up that ladder and took out 5 kids. It sounds unlikely. The ages were Maurice was 14, Martha was 12, Lewis was 10, Jenny was 8, and Betty was 5. So we have the 12-year-old and the 14-year-old, let's say, that would probably be able to put up at least a little bit of a fight in all of this. Still, 5 went missing. So this is something that we have to consider. Somebody really planned this on Christmas Eve? It seems unlikely, but maybe, because we know that this has happened in the past. The other tough thing to understand is, for example, going back to Ricky Jean Bryant, it very well may be. Now, that's not necessarily what I think, but if anybody wants to think that she did get out with her brother and was along the road, and somebody came by and kidnapped her at 4 years old, certainly possible. And you could certainly understand that if she was taken and maybe raised by somebody else and was given a new name, she probably would have no memory of being part of the Bryant family. And it very well may be that Ricky Jean Bryant is even alive today, and she was raised as Jane Smith and has no idea that she's the Ricky Jean Bryant who went missing from that house in 1949. In contrast, there is no way that a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old, maybe the 5-year-old, but the other 4, there is no way they're going to forget their original family. So the only choice would be is to kill them, because eventually they're going to, getting older. And what are you going to do? Keep these kids in a dungeon their entire lives? I mean, what are we talking about here? It starts, not to say that, I know that recently we've seen some of these stories where parents were keeping children and not feeding them and everything else. It certainly happens, but we have to think of it in the context of 5 of them in a disappearance. Once again, it seems like a lot of work. And we have to start thinking, well, what's actually going on here? This plan and everything. What exactly was going on here? It's hard to tell. Also, what I think you need to know about analyzing a disappearance like this, now you'd have to go back to like one of the first episodes of Unfound to listen to my interview with Tad Tobias. Remember him, the nobody guy? I haven't talked about him in a while, but he is a former federal prosecutor who is now a specialist in helping prosecutions in no-body murders. So prosecution somewhere in the United States wants to bring some killer to trial, but there's no body. They can contact Tad and send him all of the paperwork, and he will work with them to kind of come up with the best plan of prosecuting this killer, even though there is no body. The nobody guy, once again, I realize is going back to like the first 20 episodes of Unfound, but I think that interview still holds up to this day, over 8.5 years later. But what's interesting about this, and I can still remember talking to Tad about this, his first case that he was ever involved in, where he was a consultant, was an intentional fire where a couple of children went missing during the fire. That's true. You go back, check it. Anybody wants to go back, whether on Spotify, iTunes, or right here on the YouTube channel, you can find that interview that I did with him I haven't talked to Tad in years. Way back in the day. But the first one he ever worked on as a consultant in a nobody case was children who went missing during a fire, and the prosecution was trying to prove that the fire was intentionally set and the kids died in the fire, and the fire was so intense that these kids were burned to ashes. I think they won that case. I think they won it. So we have to keep this all in mind when we analyze. We have to look at the time when it happened, Christmas Eve. We have to look at the number of kids that were taken. We have to take a look at their ages. We have to take a look at what exactly was going on in that house at the time. Of course, we know new electrical system. We know that these kids were way up there on the third floor. We have to know that it was not in the middle of New York City when this happened, but it happened out in the hinterlands of West Virginia. On and on and on. All of this has to be taken into account. We have to be able to think about other disappearances where it's kind of the similar. Once again, Ricky Jean Bryant, Bernard Russins, and Peggy McKay, although they were adults. Remember, their son was actually found in the house deceased, but they were not. Then helping to know about this case from Tad Tobias. You have to be able to pull all of that information together to try to come up with an answer here. Now, what I would say is it's confusing to me if this was some sort of kidnapping scenario. For whatever reason, somebody hated the Sodders. There were 1940s style sex traffickers in the area or something. That they know the Sodders had a bunch of kids. They knew that the kids, their bedrooms were up there on the third floor. They knew that the Sodders had a ladder there that they could go up there and somehow force these kids to leave and everything else. It's still fairly unclear to me why you would start a fire to do all of that and to cover it up. Because in my opinion, there would be no way that these kidnappers would know that the fire would, in doing this, would you think, we start this fire, maybe they'll believe that the kids, were burned to ash. I don't think in 1945 terms, you would have known that. I don't think. Now, today, anybody who wants to find out about that can do that. There's this thing called the internet, where if you want to find out what it takes to burn a body to ash, you can research that. There are many websites where you can read about that. You couldn't do that in 1945. So to me, it would not be obvious or likely that some abductors would say, you know what, we can really add to this to really make this confusing to them. We're going to start a fire. Because it could be what happens. I mean, if you get caught up in the fire, what happens? You're taking these kids out and your plan is to burn the house, but one of them starts screaming and seemingly none of the kids yelled anything or anything. It just seems unlikely that somebody would use a fire as a way to disguise the kidnapping or the taking of 5 kids. My opinion. Likewise, even with Ricky Jean Bryant, even despite the controversy around what happened to her, and we're still not clear what happened, I don't know if anybody really thinks that fire was intentionally set so as to kidnap a child. Because my perception is that happened during the day. I mean, how did somebody get in there and intentionally set the fire? It's a little hard to understand. That doesn't mean she couldn't be kidnapped. What I'm saying is you could kidnap kids without starting a fire intentionally, as Ricky Jean Bryant might show. So overall, I have to say, I think the Sodder family got it right in 1945. Now, I would admit that it does seem that they tried to move on a little too quickly. I think, as I've read, they got caught up in their emotions. They were seeing that burned down house. They were thinking about these 5 kids missing. And in the moment, they thought, well, if we cover this all up and we'll be able to more quickly move on with our lives. That is a mistake. I would say this to anybody. That if you're, something happens and your house burns down and somebody got killed or there's some controversy, it might be arson by some outside person and somebody got injured or is in the hospital or whatever else, it is a huge mistake to want to move on with your life so quickly that you cover everything up before the proper amount of investigation and thinking about the situation is done. And we have to remember, this is the Sodder's own private property. There's nothing saying that they have to cover any of it up. Somebody is going to come in, do an investigation, try to figure out what happened. If they want to leave that house sitting there for a while, and burned and charred remains and everything, they could have done that. That they didn't do that is what I think has made this mystery what it is. I think. They let their emotions get away. They covered it up, but then they also, their emotions and fear started talking to them. And as I've seen with many families, once that happens, they start thinking about a lot of crazy scenarios. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't Italian hate in the United States after World War II. There certainly were Italians in the United States who continued to live here, who I think wanted the Third Reich to win just because they were so connected to their home country of Italy or Germany or whatever. Certainly. But I think if this were a thing back then, where pro-Italy people were taking it out on anti-Italy people or anti-Third Reich people, we would have a lot more stories of kids going missing and houses being burned down and very similar stories to the Sodder children. We don't. And so that's what also makes me think that this had nothing to do with Italian mafia being mad at the Sodder family. I think this is some rationalization going on. And as I continue to state to this day here on August 11th of 2025, and I say that I would never pick out any particular guest to say this about, but because that would be rude and unethical and everything else. A lot of guests want somebody to blame. It's not very easy to blame an electrical problem. It's not very comforting to blame, a house out in the middle of nowhere that the fire department couldn't get to very quickly. And yes, as somebody's written here, yes, there were problems. Dee Dee's writing, it seems like the fire truck took a long time. That is true. That it did, but you want the fire department to get to your house fast, live in a city. If you want it to take a while, live out in the middle of nowhere. That's the way it goes. I just think that I think they died in the fire. I think that one possible scenario is that the fire started for some reason from an electrical issue. And we have to remember, this is Christmas time. Did they have Christmas lights and everything? Did all the Christmas tree and everything else, did it overload the system? I'm certainly open to that. We still, hey, look at even today, these days, modern housing, modern electricity, everything else. Houses burning down around Christmas due to electrical problems. Still happens to this day. And my guess is that the kids were overcome by the smoke. Of course, we have to remember it's rising. They're on the 3rd floor. And the heat starts to, and the fire starts to break their bodies down, starts to make their bones weaker, the skin weaker, the joints weaker, everything gets weaker, not to the point that it's turning to ash, but then when the structure of the house really gets to the point that it can't stand up anymore and it collapses, it's kind of like throwing a snowball at a brick, a brick wall. And that the snowball, you can get that snowball real tight and everything, and it'll be fine. But as soon as you throw it against something hard, it's going to splatter. I know that's totally disgusting when we talk about humans this way. But I think that is what happened. I think their bodies were so deteriorated in the course of the fire that, yes, had the fire been put out right at that moment before the house collapses, I think the children would have been found. They would have been dead. Their bodies would have been badly damaged. But you would have been able to distinguish, yes, those are 5 humans and they're deceased. But as soon as everything gets weakened and then everything comes crashing down, everything, I think, in the human body would break apart. And then that's the reason, in going through the ashes afterwards, they couldn't find anything. That is as best as I can do, but I do not believe that they were kidnapped. I don't know what this, the sister said she heard something hitting the house and rolling down. Maybe it was a dead bird. I don't know. Hard to say. Bird, we have to admit, birds, even though we don't necessarily see it, birds do die in the middle of flight and crash, even though it's not very common. Maybe it's that, could have been something else, or maybe it wasn't really on the roof at all. Maybe it's, once again, it's one of those, in retrospect, I heard something and now I think that its fire was intentionally started. So I'm thinking somebody threw something on the house, and well, I did kind of hear something. Maybe it was on the roof. And then people start convincing themselves that they heard something that they didn't. That's how the human mind works. That's why eyewitness testimony, ear witness testimony is so horrible. But I can see in 1945 terms how this would have been very, very, very difficult to investigate and try to come to a solid conclusion. Because you don't have the, you just can't go searching databases and the news and everything to figure out, was this ever happened before? Let's see what everybody, Dee says she knows about it. And Taylor says, yeah, Chloe and Christopher Gage have vanished after a fire destroyed their grandparents' home. I know about those disappearances. Thank you, Dee. Yep, another one. So it's unusual, but it's not rare. If I can think about Bernard Rusness and Peggy McKay, if I can think about Ricky Jean Bryant, of course, Dee brought up Chloe and Gage, once again, disappearances that I know of. There are certainly others. I've already just mentioned the Tad Tobias case. It happens. And I don't think in any of these it's ever been proven that kids were actually kidnapped from the property. I think in the end, in all of these, it's, even though they're still unresolved, I think the still popular thinking is, yep, they were in the house. Somehow they did get, their bodies were compromised due to the heat and the fire, and just eventually just broke apart. It's hard for us to imagine, because here we are sitting here, we're breathing fine, we're thinking fine, our ears are working, our eyes are working, everything. But you also have to remember that 80% of the human body is water. Remember that. Seems Rockford says, I'd like to petition Netflix to not do a documentary on this case. Yeah, they'll certainly, maybe they already have, Rockford. Of course, given that this is 80 years, it very well may be that Netflix is thinking about it, being that it would be the 80th anniversary this coming December. I don't know. Rockford also says, also consider that so many items in modern homes are built to help resist the fire. Yeah, back then, not as much, of course. Yeah. Right. Hello, Stephanie. How are you tonight? So that is my insight into the disappearance of the Sodder children, the ladder and all these things. I don't know what to make of it, and like I said, it is one of those things. I enjoy it. It gives me a lot of confidence when I know that I know a lot about disappearances, because this is the work I do. And it's no different like being an engineer who builds bridges. An engineer can show up at a site where a city or something wants to build a bridge, and be able to look at, the ground, and look at how much traffic is seemingly going to be going across this bridge and all these things, and very quickly be able to think about what is the best kind of bridge and how much it's going to cost. And yeah, there's be studies that need to be done. We'll need to check the soil and everything else and a bunch of different things. But an engineer, an experienced engineer, can do this in his head or her head fairly quickly to think about what it's going to take. And they're usually, I think, pretty accurate. That's my estimation of that profession. Even when it comes like an accountant, a business person says, I have this company. Here are the issues that I'm having with, income and outgo and expenses and write-offs and everything else. And an accountant, an experienced accountant, doesn't even need to write anything down. But just in general terms, an accountant will be able to listen for a little while and say, here's your issue. Here's what you want to do. Here's what I'm going to do for you. Here are your problems. Here's what you're doing wrong. This is where I think I am when it comes to disappearances. And given these facts, and then trying to wade through some of the other things that are allegedly facts, I just don't think they were kidnapped. I just don't. If it was one child and there was no fire, then I would be, could get into that, but not 5 kids and a fire and everything else. We also have to think it's West Virginia in December and it's not warm. Somebody really chose to freeze their butts off to go do this. It's, maybe in the summer, June in West Virginia is beautiful. Great temperatures, great weather there in June. If you want to go out at 2 a.m. and kidnap some children. December in West Virginia seems really, really cold to do that they really have to do it in the cold weather. These kids died in the fire. It's very sad, very horrible, horrible. But I'm pretty sure that's what happened. So let's move on to my appearance on A&E from this past week. Now, what's you're going to find humorous about this is, how did I find out about it? I found out about it through Steve Pankey. This is true. I got a letter from him, and it said, I've recently heard that A&E did a show on my case, on me and Janelle's murder. And I heard that I don't have the letter, and I think I put it over with all the stack of other letters, but he thought that he had heard that the episode on A&E was kind of more to his side of the thinking. And I was like, I didn't see this. I don't know about this. And so I had to go find it. And here it was, the production that I took part in August of 2023. This is, of course, not the one where I went out to Greeley in December of 2023. This is, and I know I told you probably about it at the time, What they did was the production company rented an Airbnb not far from where I live here. And they got a local videographer and a lighting person to go to this Airbnb and set everything up. I show up, and then there's this big screen in front of me, and the director and the script supervisor and everything. So it's like a huge Zoom call. So I'm sitting in. If you get to see it, it's on A&E, and it's on YouTube now for free if you watch it. And I did post it in the discussion group on Facebook. You can see me in there, but that's how they did it. So where I'm sitting there, I'm sitting actually in an Airbnb. Somebody has someone to rent, to sleep over, like a motel room, but it's an Airbnb up north of Clearwater. So I had to go over there, then up. And I'm just sitting in front of this huge screen with the lights and everything. And the director is actually on the screen wherever he was. And there were other people on the screen, and there's a camera there, and they're just asking me questions. And that's how it was done. In contrast to me, of course, going the whole way out to Greeley for that production. I completely forgot I did it. I'm honest, I completely forgot. So when I found it, I said, when I did find it, when I searched for it, and I said, this must be what Steve's talking about. And I start playing. I'm like, that's me. Oh, this is that. Totally forgot. I did get more. It seems that I got more screen time in this production than I did at the other one. But I think the reason I forgot about it is because it was just so fast. I was in and out of there in an hour or something. It went very, very fast. I showed up. They were pretty much ready. I sat down and everybody came online and we just did it and I was done. In contrast to, of course, flying out to Greeley and doing all that. And of course, I would not forget about that. I was up there a couple of days and, near Christmas time of 2023. So I watched it. Steve was not correct. My assessment of that, and if you don't know what show it is it called On the Stand or On the Witness Stand or something like that with Dan Abrams, if any of you know who he is. And I did not meet him. I did not speak to him. He was not in on the work at all. Zero. I would say that it took pretty much the tone as the other production did. That Steve was pretty much guilty. They did not offer up, of course, what I've been saying for a long time, that, nobody could put Steve on that street or at the house or the footprints and everything else. They did not really get into any of that at all. My perception is it was just they just accepted that Steve did it. And the only reason they were really covering it is because it was a disappearance for 35 years. And then she's found by accident. And then somebody was actually charged and convicted. They didn't get into any of the stuff that I've made a point of talking about many times on this live show. So if you've missed it, I know all of you probably have the A&E channel. But if you missed it, you can just do a search on YouTube. I think all you have to do is do a search for A&E and Matthews, and it'll come right up. It's without the commercials. It's only like 11 minutes long or something like that. So I mean, they must be doing crazy commercials on A&E, and I don't really know what it looked like when it actually played on the A&E channel. I didn't DVR it. I don't even know. I could probably use the search function on my DVR to see if it's going to come out again. Maybe I could DVR it and see what it actually looks like when it plays on TV, because all I've seen is the edited with no commercials on YouTube. But that's me. I'm there. That's 2023 me in there, almost exactly 2 years ago. I just remember it being very early August. It might have been August 3rd, August 4th, something like that of 2023 when that was done. And it's really unusual because I'm usually in Pennsylvania. In fact, I think I might have either I went to Pennsylvania to see my dad and came back right before that was done, or I went to Pennsylvania to see my dad right after that was done. I can't remember which one. But look for that. So I'm on TV again. Who knew? And it continues to be amazing to me. As all of you know, the interview that I did with Steve Pankey is really, 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 really not what I do on the podcast. But that is the one interview that has gotten the most attention. Weird how those things work. And I remind all of you, I know I haven't brought this point up for a while. Steve reached out to many podcasts and YouTube channels to be interviewed. I was the only person who took him up on it. It's still amazing to me, but that's true. That is true. He reached out to many people. I was the only one who took him up on it. Am I happy about it? I don't know. You know, I just did it because eventually, as my assistants at the time said, well, you should do it. There was a little trepidation, a little questioning of it. But in the end, I'm a reporter. I interview people, so I had to interview them. Everybody else decided they didn't want to do that. So, yeah, go find that. In other news, I want to get to the Safari murder, but I have to go through a couple quick things. Last Thursday, I did a recording with Heather Grotman. So, of course, she has appeared on Unfound many times, like once a year, starting with Dale Kerstetter. And now I'm going to appear on her podcast. We did the recording last Thursday. I don't know when it's coming out. But we discussed what we would call suspicious deaths of Cindy James and Blair Adams. I don't know if those names ring a bell. Both Canadian cases. Blair Adams seemingly was a pretty straight guy, pretty level-headed, straight-laced, level-headed guy. Then all of a sudden, he seemingly lost his mind. Left his job in Canada, tried to get in the United States, was rejected in getting into the United States multiple times, finally found a way to sneak into the United States, and then started driving all over the place and renting cars and losing keys to the cars and renting hotel rooms, then not staying in them, on and on and on. And eventually he was found dead and looked like he had been beat up. And in fact, his internal, like his stomach or intestines, had been split open or something like that. And so it was suspicious death. It was on an unsolved mystery. It's going way back to the I think the Robert Stack days. So we discussed that. So be looking for that. But we also discussed the suspicious death of Cindy James, also from Canada, where Cindy claimed that somebody was after her, although she never used anybody's name. And there were a lot of weird things that happened around her. And eventually, like, for example, she was living in a house and she invited this couple to stay with her. And it just so happened while they were there that somebody, speaking of fires, going back to the Sodder Children, somebody started a fire in the house. Luckily, nobody died. Nobody was hurt. But certainly a lot of weird things surrounding Cindy James, claiming that people were following her and threatening her and all this. Nobody could ever be identified. And in fact, there was even a private investigator who got involved. And He seemingly, despite trying to help her out, could never show that anybody was trying to kill her. But then she did end up dead. And her ankles and wrists were tied together. And there were drugs in her system that was enough to kill her. And she was found on this abandoned property. And so we discussed both of those, and I get to offer up my opinion on both. You know, were these two murdered? Was somebody really after Blair Adams? Was somebody really after Cindy James? How to explain all this? You can tune into that whenever Heather is going to release that. I don't know when that is. She did not tell me. She's not required to tell me. I'm guessing she will tell me before it comes out. So as I can tell all of you about it, but you can go and kind of maybe study up if you want on Blair Adams and Cindy James. I know in the episode she's going to read about both of them. All we did was record my part of it, but the episode's she's going to read by herself, you know, about both of those cases. And then, you know, I'll be there to offer up my opinions. Just remembering it's not exactly my area of expertise. It's not even close. The suspicious deaths where bodies are left behind or whatever, not my area of expertise. So what I bring to a discussion like that is, well, what I think of both of these people were missing. And you probably not be surprised that I'm always, you know, I always have big time doubts when people say somebody's after me, somebody's after me, somebody is after me, and they never say anything. They never said the federal government, the CIA, aliens, or they just say somebody's after me and never say anything. I think all of you know what I think about that. I usually think there's nobody after these people at all. I think says that makes me nauseous. Sorry about that, Rockford. Those are two wild cases. He was found in a parking lot. True, right? That's true. Now I remember her case. Yeah, you'll have your hands full. Yep, well, we did it. That was last Thursday. Stephanie, I missed it. Where can we watch or listen to this? It's not out yet, Stephanie. This is going to be Heather Grotman's podcast called the Lost and Found Blogs podcast. She has appeared on Unfound many, many times. Dale Kerstetter, Ricky Jean Bryant, to name a couple of times. She has been a guest. I'm guessing she's been on at least 6 times. But she invited me to come on to her show, and I don't know what's going to be out. But it's the Lost and Found Blogs podcast, and I know it's on iTunes, Spotify, everywhere. So Heather Grotman, I just bring my area of expertise regarding disappearances, and so you can all judge on how I did looking at something that's, like I said, not really something I usually talk about. Moving on, speaking of Thursdays, this coming Thursday, I'm going to be doing a recording with Jason Blair. So last Thursday, Heather Grotman. This Thursday, Jason Blair. Once again, it's not live. This will be recorded at Played sometime in the future. Of course, Jason Blair, the same person who I interviewed, and it was broken up to 3 parts back there in July. I'm going to be appearing on his podcast for the second time, first time being back in December of 2024, where we are going to talk. I don't know if I want to necessarily get into what disappearances we're going to discuss, but we are going to concentrate on Native American disappearances. What is going on with them? What are they covered enough? What are the complications of getting enough attention for these types of disappearances? What is actually going on? You know, me doing the work that I do, am I experienced enough to talk about Native American disappearances? Are they disappearances than the disappearances of white people? Let's just say that. We'll be getting into all of that on Thursday in the recording. Once again, it's going to be recorded. It's not live. It'll come out sometime down the road, and I'll let you know when that is. But he has 3 cases picked out in particular, and I've taken the time to write some notes on all of them. And I'm really, of course, excited about doing that. Rockford says, I'll check out your TV appearance. I hate to think about what some other true crime podcast host would be willing to do for 11 minutes on A&E. Yeah, Rockford. That kind of just, I have to tell you, I don't even remember how that got lined up. Now, with the one that where I actually went out to Greeley, they, of course, first contacted me, and that was a long time coming together. Whereas the way I remember this A&E one is that it was, I wouldn't necessarily say it was on short notice, but somebody emailed me, said, hey, would like to have you on the show. And it was very unclear on if I was going to have to go anywhere. Were they going to show up at my place? What they were going to do? And they just said, hey, we'll be there next week. Here's where you got to show up. And, and that was about it. I didn't do much. And I really like that. When I don't have to do a lot, I really like that. Crank said, hello, Cranky. Where are you just getting here now, Cranky? All right. Hey, Ed, what's in the breeze? Well, I was talking about the Sodder Children. You missed that. And then I talked about me appearing on A&E like 2 weeks ago. Now, now that's playing on YouTube. I was just going through some recordings that I've appeared on that are going to be coming out in the future. One's going to be happening this Thursday. So what else is going on in the Unfound world? The refreshed Unfound podcast website is about done. I had a talk this morning with the person who has been in charge of getting it done. And not coincidentally, he's also the guy that runs the football pick'em league that I'm a part of. But he's a computer guy. And when I put it out there that I was looking for somebody to redo the unfoundpodcast.com website, he contacted me. We got together on something. And so it is about done. There's really only one major thing that needs to be done. And then it will become the new websites. Of course, still the unfoundpodcast.com. But when you go to it, it'll be all new. And because of that, I will be talking about it a lot more. You know me, I hardly ever mention the website because it's not that great. Well, it's going to be good now. So I'm sure I'll be talking about it a lot more. You can be prepared for that. So we had a good conversation this morning about what one major thing needs to be done. And I think that'll be done. And then he'll move on to the other website that I'm going to have created, which is a lot simpler. And that is going to be a website geared toward missing persons consultancy, where families can contact me, whether their disappearance is a week old or 50 years old, and I will request that they send all the files to me, and then I will be giving them my best insight on what they can do to move the investigation along, even if, because the police surely aren't doing much, what they can do within their abilities. Of course, we know as private people, we can't serve warrants. We can't subpoena anybody. We don't have what we call the power of the state. So what can be done legally, ethically, morally to bring about the solution to the resolution of their disappearance? So that is something that I've been wanting to get into, and now that website is going to be set up. Very simple website compared to the Unfound podcast website. It's just going to be really my vision of what I can do for them, my resume of what I've been doing for the last 9 years, and a contact page. That's it. And if you're wondering, no, I'm not going to work for free, but there is going to be a very unique kind of money back guarantee that goes along with that. And so that website is going to get built next. The tough one was first. This one's just very simple. I don't think there will even be any pictures. It's just going to be a lot of words. Very simple, very quick, very modest looking. Let's just put it that way. Not a lot, no whiz bang stuff going on there. And so that's going to be the other website. Cranky, nice. Make sure to give the details on when and where to watch that. Yeah, I will. As far as Heather Grotman, she'll let me know when that's going to come out. I'm appearing in a recording with Jason Blair this Thursday. He will surely let me know when that's coming out. And as far as A&E, it's up on YouTube right now, Cranky. If you want to do a search for A&E and Matthews, you'll find what I'm talking about. Other things that are going on. I'm doing an interview tomorrow night for an upcoming episode. The interview for this Friday has already been done. I'll talk about that and before we're done here tonight. That interview's already been done. That's going to come out this Friday. Tomorrow night, I'll be doing the interview for like a week and a half ago. That would be August 22nd. So August 15th's interview is already done. August 22nd's interview is going to get done tomorrow night. And then August 29th will be the next update episode. I forget what number. Are we on 20, 21? I don't even remember. So the August 29th will be the update episode. We're due. And then, as many of you know, the first Friday of every September is when we celebrate the anniversary of Unfound getting started. And so what is that? September 5th, that will come out. And I think most of you know, to celebrate that, we might have to change the time on that for D, because I'm supposed to be with Jason on do Jason's show on Thursday, D. So maybe you and I have to work out maybe a different time. If we could do that, I'd appreciate it. Certainly want to do trivia, but I was kind of fenced in by Jason's schedule as well. So D, you let me know what you want to do on that. But the first Friday of September will be the 9th anniversary episode, where I will once again play the first interview that I ever did for Unfound, and that was with Mary Lyle, mother of Susie Lyle. Of course, Susie is still missing. And of course, what I've stated is her interview will continue to be the one on the anniversary until Susie's disappearance is solved. That's my plan, if you're wondering. You're just going to do that forever? Well, not necessarily forever. I, of course, hope Susie Lau is discovered alive tomorrow. And when that happens, whenever that day that is, we will move on to probably the interview that I did for the second episode of Unfound, and that was for Jason Jolkowski. That's probably how I'm going to do it, if you're wondering. But otherwise, I have another big phone call to do before the interview tomorrow night. And in fact, probably before the week's over, I'm hoping to do 2 big phone calls on 2 different disappearances. One is a disappearance that Unfound is already featured. But this is somebody that I've wanted to talk to for a while. And we're finally going to make that happen tomorrow evening. And the guy is really up for it. And I'm excited to talk to him. But I at this point, I can't tell you who he is and what the disappearance is. I'm sorry. But I know you like to know this stuff because it's kind of, I know it interests you. But the other talk will depend on some things. I don't know. I'm hoping it happens this week. Nothing is scheduled. But I'm hoping it happens this week. But I think it's going to happen. And this would be for a disappearance that has not yet been featured on Unfound. But it is a disappearance that I've been working on behind the scenes for like at least a month now. And I think that this guy, also a guy, can also really, really help me in understanding this particular disappearance better as I continue to work on it. I've already been communicating with the missing person's family and everything. And I'm hoping I could talk to this guy because he knew the missing person fairly well and maybe can give me some information, maybe that the family can't, because as we know, sometimes coworkers and friends know the missing person better than the family does. You know, there could be things the missing person will tell friends, but not tell family. So we'll just have to see. I think, how can we help find Susie? Good question, I think. First of all, you have to go back and listen to the episode. You have to go back and listen to my 2016 interview with Mary Lyle, because I still think that's the best interview that she's done. And we stay away from a lot of the sensationalism that I think has popped up regarding Susie's disappearance since then, regarding, for example, the idea that Israel Keys caused her disappearance. There's a lot of that going around out there, and that is not something that I think is probable or even possible. And her own mother, who certainly knows who Israel Keys is, does not think that Israel had anything to do with Susie's disappearance either. So I would first go back and listen to that episode and listen to that interview a couple times. Next, if we're going to look at what is most likely regarding Susie's disappearance, I still think that her boyfriend / ex-boyfriend is a choice. And I still think that her father is a choice. Why? Or his father is a choice. Why? Because he was the guy that days after Susie went missing, he said, I see Susie here. I see Susie there. See Susie there. Oh, she's there. It's still one of the more weirder stories we've had on Unfound. The cops started following this guy around and found out, of course, he was lying about all of it. So what, maybe somebody needs to check into what have those two done with their lives. I will admit that I've not looked into that. What have they done with their lives since 1998 when Susie went missing? We might also think about, is this boyfriend's father still alive? Are the parents still married? Are this guy's parents still married? Because we know how sometimes divorced women love to talk about their ex-husbands. Just ask Steve Pankey. So these are some things that come to mind off the top of my head. Do I think that Susie Lyle's disappearance is solvable? I do. It's not one of the more solvable ones, in my opinion, in Unfound's catalog. Unfortunately, even though we surely know that she was abducted, and we surely can suspect that she was not, she wasn't alive too long after she was taken. Maybe we could think of this along the similar lines of Jody Who's the Truth. There's signs that they were abducted, probably didn't live too long after that, but surely neither of these women walked out of their lives or anything. Other than that, once again, I think this, who were Susie's friends, women friends, who she went to the University of Albany. Maybe all these years later, time reveals things, and maybe they need to be talked to again, not because they had anything, of course, to do with Susie's disappearance, but that was 27 years ago. They're all now in their mid to late 40s, and they've had, they've lived some lives now, and maybe they look back and they see something that was going on at the time in a different way. And I realize that time is usually not our friend when it comes to disappearances, but in some ways it can be. People mature, people grow up, people get experience in their lives, and they then look back at something that happened 20 years ago in a different light. We could say that about anything in our lives, not just disappearances, but friendships and relationships and jobs and all sorts of things. We get some years behind us. We look back at that and say, well, maybe that wasn't as bad as we thought. Or we look back at it and say, wow, it was worse than I thought. Just some ideas. D, we could talk about it, but I'll go over her. I don't know what that, go over her till like 7:30. I don't know what that means, D. I think I plan to re-listen tonight and take down any questions I have. All right, I think. Thanks for doing that. So those are some things that are going on this week and the next few weeks regarding Unfound. As you could tell, I've been keeping busy. And of course, there's still the FOIA paperwork we're waiting from the Coast Guard regarding these disappearances that I want to turn into a series. Assistant Eric is still waiting on that. In addition, I have a call out to a guy regarding a disappearance from a few years ago that probably I'm hoping to eventually talk to him, hopefully this week. That'll probably be one of the first disappearances featured in September after the 9th anniversary episode. So I got a lot going on. I don't look like I have a lot going on, but I have a lot going on. All right, let's move on to, we got just this story about the safari murder. When Bianca Rudolph died from a shotgun blast in Zambia, her husband, Larry Rudolph, a Pittsburgh area dentist, the Pittsburgh story, claimed it was a tragic accident that occurred during a dream hunting vacation in Africa. But more than 5 years later, bombshell revelations turned that narrative upside down. Bianca's death, initially ruled accidental by local authorities, and I guess in Zambia in October 2016. D, you're leaving? All right, good to see it here tonight, D. Her death sparked a years-long international investigation and uncovered lies, a secret workplace affair, and a hefty financial motive for murder. And it's now, of course, part of a docu-series, Trophy Wife Murder on Safari, and it's on Hulu. The married couple was getting ready to leave their hunting camp in Kafue National Park on the morning of October 11th of 2016, so right after Unfound got started, when Bianca was fatally shot with a 12-gauge shotgun. Oh, my goodness. I have a 12-gauge shotgun. That would not be fun. Larry told the Zambian police that he heard the shot while he was taking a shower and that he found his wife of 34 years on the bedroom floor bleeding from the chest. He said he suspected that the shotgun had been left loaded from the hunt the previous day and that the gun went off while Bianca was trying to pack it into its case. However, federal authorities in the U.S. believe that Bianca was shot from 6.5 to 8 feet away and determined that it was not likely she pulled the shotgun's trigger based on a reconstruction of the incident. U.S. officials later accused Larry of killing his wife in order to collect millions of dollars in life insurance and continue his relationship with a woman last name Milliron who worked at his dentist's office. He filed fraudulent claims on the 9 separate life insurance policies to obtain $4.9 million. That's life insurance, all right. In August 2022, less than a year after his arrest, Larry was convicted in U.S. federal court of foreign murder and mail fraud. He was sentenced to life in prison. During Larry's trial in Denver, a federal prosecutor said that Larry admitted to the shooting while dining with Milliron upon hearing in 2020 that the FBI was probing into the death of Bianca. Larry told jurors that I did not kill my wife. I could not murder my wife. I would not murder my wife. Milliron, who had been romantically involved with Larry for years, was also found guilty in connection with the case. In June 2023, she was sentenced to 17 years in federal prison for perjury, obstruction of justice, and being an accessory after the fact. Once again, Trophy Wife Murder on Safari is now on Hulu. If you have that, the series is directed and executive produced by Danny Sloan, D-A-N-I Sloan. Trophy Wife is based on the Rolling Stone article Before the Dentist Knows You're Dead by Matt Sullivan, who also serves as an executive producer. So why am I talking about this? Well, first of all, because I'm not a big fan of dentists. I'm glad that I haven't had to go to the dentist in a couple years. As I think I told you back then, I had some dental work done in 2022, 2023 that was not cheap. I think it was good work. I'm hoping to never have to spend that amount of money on my teeth again, unless something, of course, weird happens, like I get hit in the face or something. But otherwise, just naturally, I hope that I never have to spend that much money on my teeth again. Actually, I got along with my dentist just fine. But really, who is a fan of going to the dentist? But also, I think if the dentist had listened to Unfound, of course, when he did this, Unfound had just started. But if he had really wanted to get away with getting rid of his wife, he should have just done what we know many husbands have done on Unfound's disappearances. We know what husbands do. They, as the story goes, it's a stereotype, but husband and wife go to bed. Husband wakes up the next day. She's gone. Car's still there. Purse is still there. Phone's still there. Clothes are still there. Everything, her ID's still there. Everything is still there, but she's gone. And what do these guys say? I just don't know what happened. And we know, you can go back through all of Unfound's episodes and count that type of disappearance. Of course, as you know, I have a term for those. It's called the man said type of disappearance, where the guy says something and it just doesn't make, it just doesn't seem like it's true. This guy could have done that, probably gets away with it. If this dentist had just been here in the United States and just done something to his wife in the middle of the night, already had some place that he planned he was going to bury her out in the middle of nowhere, and did something to her at her home and drove her out there and buried her and got back there before the sun came up. And then as soon as the sun comes up, he says, "Oh, my wife's not here." And he calls 911 and says, "Hey, my wife's not here." He probably gets away with it. It sucks. But he would get away with it. Now, as far as the insurance money, yes, that might be a problem. But we also know, though, that eventually some of these women are declared dead. And once that happens, insurance is paid out. Rockford says, anti-dentite much. You're an anti-dentite. They have their own schools. I know that joke, Rockford. They can't claim they don't remember, so instead they say they weren't conscious. Right, Stephanie. And Rockford, I think you had another comment up here too. The boyfriend's father, going back to Susie Lau, the boyfriend's father did everything he could to make himself look as suspicious as possible. Rockford, he's certainly dead. That's a pretty good way of putting it. But if only this dentist had waited a little longer and listened to some Unfound episodes, he might not be in jail yet. I'm, of course, saying this tongue in cheek. Of course, I want all of these guys caught. I want all of them thrown in prison. And if the death penalty is eligible in that state, I might even think about maybe that too. I'm not a big death penalty guy, to be honest, but instead he came up with this plan. Of course, we have to believe that he had this plan well before they ever went to Africa. I need to get rid of my wife. I got this new woman who's putting all this pressure on me to leave my wife, and I can get all this money, everything. I have to come up with something. And he comes up with this idea that seemingly authorities saw through pretty quickly. It's the way it goes. I don't feel bad for this guy at all. But I will stay like I said, on the other hand, he could have learned something had he waited a little longer and listened to Unfound. So what do we got going this Friday? We're going to Pennsylvania. Of course, we were there not too long ago with Joey Offit. But this disappearance is Zach Vidal, like Vidal Sassoon, Vidal. He went missing from Pottsville, Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, I did not write down the date. Let me, how did I forget to do that? Hold on a second. He went missing on October 22nd of 2022. A lot of 22s in that date. A lot of 2s in that date. Zach Vidal went missing from Pottsville, Pennsylvania, 27 years old on October 22nd of 2022. His aunt Cindy is the guest, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's a very emotional interview. Cindy, at least for the first part of the interview, had a hard time keeping it together. All right. You know that this is not, it's very, very, very rare that I bring this up, but this is, you just should prepare yourself for that. If you're easily emotionally invested, if you're easily emotionally, your emotions can get triggered very easily, this might be one of those interviews. But she did a great job. But his aunt was the guest. And what we have to figure out in this particular disappearance is, did a party really happen or not? So it's Zach Vidal, Vidal, Pottsville, Pennsylvania, 27 years old, October 22nd of 2022. His Aunt Cindy is the guest. And I know many of you are in the discussion group. You've probably seen her post several times about Zach's disappearance. We're finally having her on, and that will be this Friday. So that's all I got for you tonight. I got to the Sodder Children, me being on A&E, the Safari murder of the dentist. Talked a lot about a lot of stuff going on here at Unfound. You know, the stuff that I've done, a new website and some phone calls and everything. And by the way, overwhelmingly, the Marty Evans poll, overwhelmingly people think that she died in an accident. She and the truck went into a body of water somewhere. That's what the think tank, for the most part, decided. I thought it was something else, but just needed to tell you all that. So now I'm done. That's it. Unfound Live for August 11th of 2025. Keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not go missing. Do not end up on my podcast. Charlie, I don't know if you're here or not anymore. You said you were going to leave, but I'm going to tell you to say hi to the kids for me anyway. Good night.